Alrighty guys, what is up and welcome back. So today is going to be a video that I've been getting requested, and that is delving into the topic of long range shooting, what it is that I do in order to be successful, and what I would recommend for you guys in order to be successful in the realms of the way you set up your rifle, the type of equipment that you're going to be using, so our gear equipment checklist, as well as the processes for zeroing, gathering dope, setting up dope books, everything like that that I personally do in order to be as successful as possible. Keep in mind that these are my methods of doing things. They're not necessarily going to be maybe the best way or the most efficient way for what you guys have set up. This is just kind of the way that I do it, the way that I found best, and the way that I've helped a lot of other guys, getting guys out here to shoot, to become successful on the topic. So it's going to be a long video, probably one of my longest ones to date, because there's a lot of information that I would like to delve into here. So if you guys stick through to the end, if you do have any questions, just go ahead and let me know. So let's get right on into it. Alrighty, so first things first is going to be right off the bat, the most important part to being able to shoot long range is the type of rifles you set up that you've got. So I want to start this with a premise of what is it you plan to do with your specific setup. You can have one that's going to be a multifaceted build, something similar to this GPR or Recce right here, or you can have something that's a bit more tailored, a bit more specific to your use case. In this instance being long range, and you can have something built out like an SPR like this guy right here. Now there's a whole long list of gamut of things that you can go into as far as the barrel lengths go, the type of optics you use, the magnification that you've got. But the thing that's been working for me the most, especially in the special purpose rifle, special purpose receiver, precision AR, is just a good old-fashioned 16-inch barrel. So there's not really any use, for me at least, in my area of going any longer than a 16. Honestly, the 14.5 can do everything that the 16 can do. You're just going to have a little bit more energy down range, and the 16 is going to handle distances like 700-800 yards a little bit better. But again, it's going to be your use case. So a couple of things to consider is, first off, going to be the barrel length of which you choose. Generally, 16-inch barrel is going to be getting right around 75 to 120 feet per second more velocity over a 14.5, depending on the type of ammunition you use, that be it a 55 grain projectile or a 77 grain projectile. The higher the weight for your projectiles is, the more of the velocity spread that you're going to actually gain. So if your use case is to be only shooting 55s out to, like, say 500 yards, which is perfectly capable of doing, a 14.5 setup like this might be right for you. Save a little bit on the length and weight of the system, especially once you start attaching suppressors to these setups. It's going to help you out a little bit there. But if you plan on shooting more of a precision rifle stuff, you plan on pushing some 77s out to a little bit of distance, my advice would be to delve into more of a 16-inch barrel. Now, a couple of the things that you're going to do with your setup is you're going to want to understand the optic that you're getting, how the optic works, what you prefer to do. Now me, and I get asked a lot of the times, why do I use MOA over mils? Mils are a much easier system for especially somebody that's new to long range shooting to get used to use, because it works in increments of 10. So it's 15 clicks is 1.5 mils, 20 clicks is 2 mils, so on and so forth. Where MOA, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to math that way, but it's going to be working in quarters or fours. So 4 clicks is 1 MOA, 8 clicks, 2 MOA, so on and so forth. A little bit more difficult to understand, but personally, I don't really get lost in the turret any when I'm dialing using MOA, because it's got plenty of information on there. It's really easy to get into, it's really easy to dial, really easy to understand. But for you, the shooter, especially if you're new shooters, personally, I recommend you go into the mils, just because it's going to be a little bit faster, a little bit easier for you to learn. But if you're like me, you grew up using MOA, it's just like I stuck with. That's kind of my reasoning behind that. But the optic that you're going to want to use. So I see a lot of guys, they want to cheap out on optics, and the problem that ends up actually causing is One, with your turrets, the turret mechanism is a very fine precision mechanism, and if you're cheaping out on your optics, you might be dialing 1 mil into your scope, but the actual adjustments that it's giving you can be plus or minus however many. You could be dialing 1 mil and your scope actually came up to 1.4 mils. And those minor amounts of adjustment at distance is going to make a huge difference. 1 mil at 1,000 yards is 36 inches. So if you're off 0.4 mils, you're looking at 15 inches of difference at distance like that for your adjustment. So that's something I want to pay attention to. Is one of the areas that you really want to put money into is a good quality optic. Now the optic that I've got on my SPR here, it is the tried and true Leupold Mark IV. This is the LRT version, so it's a 4.5 to 14. Now this one is in second focal plane. Initially when I purchased this, I was a little bit more strapped for cash, so I wanted to get something that was going to be rugged and have really good tracking and work really well. And this optic has just been so great that I haven't actually changed from it. I've been running this Mark IV for close to 8 years now, and it's got tens of thousands of rounds underneath its belt, both in 308, 300 Win Mag, and 5.56. And the optic has never lost zero on me. I've never had a problem with something jarring and losing zero. They're incredibly lightweight. This optic actually weighs less than a Razor 1-6 by a couple of ounces. The eye box is really good, and it's very, very clear glass. There are other optics out now that are pretty good. A lot of the primary arms GLX line are making pretty decent optics. You can also get into the Archon optics, which are guaranteeing their tracking of their turrets. And the way that optic technology has come now versus whenever I bought this even 8 years ago, it has advanced quite a bit. Now moving over to this is one that I just recently did a video on, and you guys know already that's the Trijicon Credo 1-8 LPDO. Again, MOA reticle, MOA turrets. One thing that I do want to harp on is you want to make sure that you're getting a reticle that matches your turret in there. There's a lot of older optics you're going to have mil reticles, MOA turrets. Personally, I don't like that because it makes it a lot harder to convert and make corrections at distance versus if you just had matching turrets and a matching reticle. So keep that in mind as well whenever you're purchasing an optics. You want to make sure that you're having matching reticles and turrets no matter what it is that you do decide to go with. Now another thing that I greatly recommend for your gear is going to be a bubble level. So whenever you fire a round downrange, your optic and your barrel are both sitting on a plane. So your optic will be here, your barrel will be here. If you start to tilt that optic or that rifle one way or the other, that round is not a laser beam coming out of there. There's a flat plane from your optic, and there's a point where that bullet is rising and then meeting wherever your adjustment is for that optic. So if you've got a little bit of cant or tilt in there, when that round leaves the barrel, instead of it coming straight up to its apex and then falling down into your target, you're going to tilt it, and that round is going to go off to one side or the other dependent on where you have that rifle level. Now you want to make sure that you are perfectly leveling these and doing as good as you can. I'm very meticulous about that when I'm mounting these optics and making sure that the level is perfectly in line and plumb with the optic as well as the rifle itself. A lot of guys like to say, oh, you want to mount it because your rifle is going to be turned, so you want your reticle to be perfect. Don't do that. Just mount the optic perfectly level to the gun, and then vice versa, mount your bubble level perfectly level to your optic. So again, a lot of things with precision, a lot of those little things are really going to matter because think of it like a cone. It's going to magnify the further out you get those inconsistencies. And again, I have levels on both of these optics. They got them where they can mount to the receiver as well. Personally, I don't like that. I like to mount it to the optic itself. That way I can level it to the turret and the reticle inside the scope, and then level the scope to the gun itself. Lastly, but not least, one of the things you're going to want is a bipod in order to get stable and prone or off of different barricade positions. Now, I've been asked a couple of times, why do I stack tolerances and all the other kind of stuff on a bipod? I've had guys make fun of me because like, oh, you've got a Harris mount that mounts to a sling stud, that mounts to a Picatinny, that mounts to, a M-lock rail like this guy down here, I like to be able to remove this if I need to, especially if I'm running a GPR. I'll remove it and just stow it in my cargo pocket. But also, one of the other reasons is if you're actually having to stabilize off of something at distance, you might not have a platform out far enough, and you may want to be able to actually move this back and mount it further back on the receiver. As silly as this might look, there's a couple of different reasons for doing something like this. One of those being if you are running from an extreme distance. So if you guys are up in the mountains and you're shooting down into valleys on the tops of mountains, the bipod's up here, it's a lot less stable than if you move it back closer to the receiver. You're able to get a lot more stability with it right there. Whenever you're done shooting, doing whatever it is you're doing that day, you can move it back to the front, and then you can stow your bipod back away. Now, when you're purchasing a bipod, no matter what one that you go with, a couple of things that you want to make sure that you have is, one, you want to make sure that that bipod is able to swivel. A lot of guys like to have pan. I haven't personally found that necessary. If I'm going to have to turn and move to another target, there's enough flex in these legs to where I can do that if it's a small amount. But if I don't, it's always going to be better for me to have to be able to pick up and move it, because you want to make sure that you're building a good position behind this gun to get accurate shots. And if you're panning and tilting, you're no longer perfectly in line with that gun, able to absorb the recoil and get quick follow-up shots if need be. Another thing you're going to want to make sure you have is having notched legs on your bipod. You'll see some of these Harris bipods where it's got a little twisty thing right here where it just friction locks. If you want to do that, you do you. They are a little bit cheaper, but for me personally, I recommend that you have notched legs. That way it's a quick adjustment point and it's solid, and that thing isn't gonna go anywhere. And then lastly, whenever you're mounting your bipod, a lot of people have seen that I actually have a string that's mounted in here that does two things. One, if I'm on some kind of like a 2x4 or 4x4 platform, tree, branch, whatever, I can't get both of these legs on here, I can actually lay that string on that item right there and get some sort of stability if I have to get a little bit more than just laying the handguard of the rifle on the object. And also, whenever you're deploying these, you could pull one leg down and it'll deploy both of your legs, so it's a lot faster deploying your bipod. So if you're going down, getting into position, you can just flick that bipod out, get down into position, and rock and roll like that. So that's the rifle setups. Other things like stocks, muzzle devices, triggers, things like that, it's going to be personal choice, and everybody has kind of their own thing that they like. Personally, I like to have collapsible stocks because dependent on a position that I'm in, I may need to collapse in or collapse out. If I'm wearing body armor, if I'm wearing a chest rig, something like that. I like to be able to have more adjustment to my length of pull there. And then, of course, as far as triggers go, I recommend Geissele for precision dedicated guns. I like these flat face triggers a lot. Just think of it like a fulcrum. The further you get away from a fulcrum point with a lever, the more leverage you have with the less amount of energy you have to input into the system to get it to pull. So think of that the same way on a trigger. Instead of being up here on the trigger, I'm going to be more towards the bottom. I'll run my thumb over the side, and I'll actually rake and have my finger resting on the base of the trigger guard down here as I'm pulling that. And it just gives a more crisp, clean trigger pull for taking really fine, accurate shots. That's just me personally. And then, of course, having ambidextrous, that's going to be gun dependent. I'm not ambi on that one because I don't like the safety hitting my hand. They do make shorter safeties, I know, but this is just what I've got. If you do want to be ambi, just keep that in mind. But for this, I have it because I will run my thumb over on this side, and I like to be able to actuate that for those more accurate shots. All right, and next up is going to be the equipment that I would recommend that you have. So I'm going to kind of have this broke up into two different subcategories, and that's going to be the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. In order to be successful at distance, there are certain elements that you're going to want to cover, certain things that you're going to want to know in order to maximize your capability and your first round success at those different distances. And that is going to be knowing your velocity, knowing the range, the distance to your target. So these are going to be your knowns that you have. So think of this as a math equation. You've got your knowns, your unknowns, variables. And then as well as the environmentals in which you are actually shooting. Now, first thing that I'm going to recommend, and this is what I personally use and that I have found to work really well, is the SIG rangefinders. I'm not quite sure what they do
in these rangefinders to make them work as well as they do, but this is one of the more accurate ones that I found. It's very fast. You double click and you hold on the second click, and you can just work that rangefinder across different items, and it's like every 1/8 of a second it's re-updating. It's shooting a laser and it's giving you a distance. It's a pulse laser, I believe, is what is actually found in this, and this works on reflective targets. This is I want to say it's the 1500 model. I've got it painted over the thing now, so I can't really read it, but I believe this is the 1500 model, and I have been able to very easily and accurately range reflective targets, so vehicles, houses, white objects, anything like that, out to about a mile with this. Non-reflective targets or flat surfaces, targets that are large enough to actually connect with, like a brick wall, a rock face, something like that, I'm usually getting about 12 to 1500 yards depending on the object and the time of day, as well as the overcast that day. And then on non-reflective targets such as tree lines, animals, I've actually ranged deer with this as well. I am accurately able to guesstimate, get that all the way out to about 900 yards. And this particular rangefinder, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe was about $400. So that's really cheap for what a rangefinder is concerned. And for the amount of performance that I'm actually getting out of this, that is really good. So it's one that I recommend, but as one of your must-haves, first things first is going to be a good rangefinder. Second up is some way to be able to read environmentals. So a couple of things that are going to play a really huge role in being successful at long distance is knowing your wind, knowing your temperature, because temperature is going to affect the velocity of the bullet. So the hotter it is, the higher your velocity is going to be for a given round. It doesn't matter who makes the bullet, who makes the powder, anything. There's going to be a variance with everything. Some are better than others. Like if you're a reloader, Varget is more temperature stable than IMR 4064 by a good bit, but there still is a little bit of variance in there, and that's something you need to pay attention to, as well as the particular manufacturer of the rifle and then what cartridge you're shooting as well. That's also going to play a role in having a difference in velocity at different temperatures. With this guy here, with my match ammunition that I use for this, which is 75 grain Badlands, at 95 degrees, I am at 2787 feet per second out of a 16-inch barrel with a 75 grain projectile. At 30 degrees, I'm about 2720. So that amount of difference, if I'm pulling data from a day that I shot where it was 40 degrees out, and I come out another day and I shoot and it's 90 degrees out, you're looking at a significant amount of more drop at a given target at, say, 600 yards versus the day that you had actually shot it. So things like that are important to know. Temperature is a big one. Also, wind. So it's a fairly windy day out today. We're having sustained winds of about 10 miles an hour, and we're having gusts as much as 20 miles an hour. So I've got on my range book here, I've got it set up for this target here that is 600 yards. I'm looking at 10.5 minutes of difference in elevate, or difference in wind hold that I'm having to do off the left edge of the target in order to get a hit on this target with a 77 grain projectile out of my 14.5 inch gun. And you do 10 times 6, you're looking at almost 5 feet in the wind that you're actually having to hold in order to just connect to this targeted distance. So you kind of hear it now. That amount of wind right there is going to blow your target, your round off target a pretty significant amount. So that's something you need to pay attention to as well. And then thirdly, a lot of people will say you need to know your altitude, and it's less so your altitude than it is your barometric pressure. So if you understand what barometric pressure is, it's actually the air density at a given altitude. The higher you go, the higher the altitude, the lower your barometric pressure is, and the less that round, the less air that round, or air resistance that round has as it's flying down range to connect. So if you're at 3,000 feet elevation, you might have a barometric pressure of like 25.50 inches of mercury, where at sea level you're looking at anywhere from 29.5 all the way up to 31 inches of mercury. The air down at sea level is a lot more dense. Thus, that bullet is going to be encountering that air, denser air, and it's going to be slowing it faster. It's not going to be quite as efficient at flying down range, so you're going to have to hold higher at a lower elevation than you are at a higher elevation. Now, if you're staying in the same general location, you're staying at sea level, generally it's not going to change enough to matter, but I'm here in Northeast Florida. where we're at like 15, 20 feet above sea level in most areas. I think we're 40 feet here. If I were to go to Arizona or Colorado or something like that, start shooting up there where they're 3,000 feet, my data here won't be any good there. You're going to have to get new velocities, you're going to have to get new hard dope, and you can minimize some things and make yourself more accurate at getting first round hits if you know what to do. But having something like a Kestrel to be successful at long distance is definitely going to be a must have, especially if you're going to be consistent at those given distances. Every time I come out, I've got a data book here, and I will actually annotate my temperature, my barometric pressure for that day, the wind, or what it's doing, and I will actually write out a range card to be able to annotate and even look back on to be able to tell on different days and compare. That way you can give yourself the most information to be as successful as possible. Another must-have is some way of actually gaining or getting a velocity out of your round and being able to judge and gauge those velocities at different temperatures for your specific gun. Don't take data from somebody else's gun or another gun you have at a different barrel length. There's going to be slight amounts of variance. You can get close like that, but if you want to be as successful as you can, you're going to want to pick yourself up a good chronograph. Now this is now outdated. It used to be the top of the line. Now I believe the Garmin is the current all the rage, and I've used one, and they're a lot more convenient in the fact that this actually has to be physically mounted to the gun, to the barrel, in order to get velocities. So it's going to mess with your barrel's harmonics. It's going to also make your zero. It's going to cause a shift in zero while it's on the gun. This gun here being zeroed, if I throw this on there at 100 yards, I'm actually dropping a couple of inches low. So you don't really want to rely on getting a zero while this is on there. And that's why the Garmin is nice, is you can get a lot more data and not have to, now I got a zero and then I got a chronograph, so I got to spend 20 rounds zeroing and I got to spend another 20 rounds chronographing. You can just combine all that into one, lay it next to it, it'll give you all of your velocities for that, and then have the Kestrel sitting there so you can get good data on whatever the temperature was for that day while you're getting your velocities from the Garmin. But regardless, whatever you do, whether it be a Magnetospeed or I recommend a Garmin because they're about the same price. I think Garmin's like $100 more. Get yourself a good chronograph. All right, last for the must-haves is going to be a data book. I recommend getting the Write in the Rain notebooks because days like today, where it's been most of the day has been a torrential downpour with pretty severe thunderstorms. If you're out on a day where it gets wet in any way, with a pencil, you can actually physically still gather all the data you need, not have to worry about it smearing. Now you do have to worry if you're using a pen that's not Write in the Rain's pen or a Sharpie in smearing, but with a pencil, these do pretty good. And I usually will separate my data book into two different sections. So I've got the dope side right here. So this actually has my dope standing for data on previous engagements. So it'll be something that I've confirmed from my holds in a chart of 25-yard increments. And then I'll have the temperature for that. So I'll have a 70, 85, and 100 degree different dope charts for the different temperatures that I can look back on. So I don't have to rely on my app. And then as well as the other side being your range card. So you'll actually want to physically write out what it is you're looking at downrange in order to be able to accurately guesstimate what it is that's going on. All right, and lastly, we're going to get into what I like to consider the like-to-haves, or what would be nice, the kind of things that will kind of just help make being successful a little bit easier. You don't need these items in order to be successful, but it does help quite a bit. Now, the first thing being a range bag. Now this kind of the rinky-dink thing that I've got right here is something that I've actually been using for quite a while, and it's something that I had made while I was in the Marine Corps, and it's something that I've been using for probably a good 10 years now in shooting long range. And it's literally just the pillow that I had that I used while I was in Afghanistan, wrapped it in duct tape, and it was kind of a multi-use thing back then. I could use it as a pillow, I could use it as a rear bag. There's a lot of things I can use it for. If I'm up on a barricade and I need something underneath in order to help support, I could do that. They make now different things you can get. Armageddon Gear is one of the better companies that you can buy things from. But a rear bag is something that's going to be really nice to have, and it's going to make getting stable in the prone and then at different positions off barricades, being able to use it to just kind of fill void spaces to make you a little bit more stable, just make things a little bit easier for you. And then last is going to be a good, decent spotting scope. Now there's a couple of different routes you can actually go with this, and it's going to be dependent on your use case. Personally, I can gauge a lot of my corrections that I need to do just looking through my optic. And then I also teach my guys the same thing, is to be able to gauge through their optic. But they do make these with and without reticles. This particular one is a loophole spotting scope without a reticle. The magnification range, again, is going to be dependent on you and your use case. But generally, I'll set it on 15, and say the guy's shooting 600 yards. I will set the parallax on this for a distance a little bit closer, and setting that parallax allows me to see the mirage, and I can actually tell him at given distances what the wind is doing based off of how the mirage and where the mirage is moving, and give him an accurate wind call like that. So this is going to be more of a spotter thing, or more of a thing for you if you've got something like a 1 to 8. And it's a little harder to see them really tiny targets at distance. It'll just help give you a little bit more of an edge. It's a nice to have. It's not something that you absolutely need to be successful at distance, but I figured I'd throw that guy in there too. So that'll do it for the first part, guys. Next up, we're going to go over to my zero range, set up a zero target. I'm going to kind of go over my procedures for how I zero a gun and what it is that I do, and then we'll go from there to moving on to the more nuances of actually shooting at distance.
All right, so next up is going to be my zeroing portion. So a couple of things that I want to premise is you want to have good managed expectations of your particular setup, as well as the type of ammunition that you're using. If you're coming out here with 55 grain M193 ball, you're not going to be shooting dimes at 100 yards, and vice versa. If you want to have really cheap ammo for plinking, match ammo is absolutely not that. Usually match ammo is going to be half again as much as ball ammo, if not twice as much as what ball ammo actually costs. So keep that in mind when you're shooting. Now, when putting together a gun, you're going to want to consider the use case for it. If you're doing an SPR specific, I recommend doing a stainless steel type barrel. They're going to be a lot more accurate versus a 4150, I think, is the other type of steel that they normally use in barrels. And that you'll find that even the Bloodline style of barrels. Now, Bloodline barrels are incredibly accurate, but my 14.5 Bloodline, on its best day, is not nearly as accurate as what I'm getting out of this gun here. So I've got two different types of ammunition loaded up here. First is going to be 55 grain M193. I've got 5 rounds of that at 100 yards. And then I'm going to roll right into some 77 grain match ammo. Now, these 77s I've actually never shot out of this gun, so seeing how these group is going to be a new one. Now, you'll notice that whenever I shoot these, that they're not going to be dead center of the bullseyes that are on these targets, because generally I like to pick a finer aiming point. The old, I think, misnomer is aim small, miss small. So the smaller the point of aim that you've actually got, the more accurate it's able to be. One of the things that I really like about the reticle in this is it's got a quarter MOA opening in the middle, so it's not a solid through and through crosshair. There's a gap, and I can put an item in that gap and get a more infinitely fine aiming point than if it was just a black crosshair, because generally, naturally, your eye is going to want to move something out of the way of whatever it is you try to look at. So that's why, personally, I really like this reticle for that reason. So the ball ammo does shoot pretty good out of this gun, but it's not anywhere near what I'm getting out of match ammo. So let's go ahead and do the 5 rounds of ball first. Now, when setting up your position, when you're zeroing, think garbage in, garbage out. If you're not getting a good zero, you're not establishing a good zero, you're not going to be successful downrange. You want to really take your time to make sure that your zero is right. Shoot a couple, come back on a couple different days before you call it good, is generally what I will do. So what I'll do here is I will generally zero a gun at whatever given distance, and then I will actually take it out to 300 yards on a calm day, which today is not that, and I will actually check the horizontal at 300 yards when there's absolutely zero wind, because that's going to give me a greater deviance of where the zero is at versus what it would be at one of these closer distances. It's going to be easier to see and judge. So for these M193s, I want to go bottom left square, right corner of the diamond. All right, that's actually about a 1.1, 1.2 MOA group, about a 1.25 MOA group, which this gun is pretty consistently between 1.2 and 2 MOA with M193, so that's one of the better groups, but it's definitely not what this gun does every day with that type of ammunition. Now, match ammunition, I'm pretty consistently half MOA, so let's see if the 77s in this are any different. Make sure that your gun's level. I'm going to shoot the right diamond. I'm going to aim for the left corner. All right, those look low compared to what I do with the 75s normally, which that's why something you have to check constantly with different guns is how it's going to retain zero between different calibers. But all in all, I would say that's probably, looks like I got 4 rounds in the same hole and I had one that squeaked a little bit high. So let's go ahead, write down, look at these targets and see exactly how this turned up, and I'll kind of give you my general idea of how I would correct this, what I would do after the fact, and then we'll move out to distance, take some shots with the 14.5 out to, say we'll try 600 yards in this wind with some 55s and see if we can't squeak them in there. All right, and there you go. So over here, so this is going to be my aiming point for the 77s, and then this is going to be my aiming point for the 55s. It actually doesn't like these 77s like it does the 75s. Generally, it'll squeak 5 rounds in an area about the size of where these and those 3 are at. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 up here. That was my first shot with the 77s. It went right there, and then the rest of them kind of squeaked in low. You can see horizontally, the mean center of my group is actually pretty good of where I was aiming. It was at the tip of the diamond like that. And then the 55s was right here. To be honest, that's probably one of the best groups that I've shot with that gun with 55s. It looked a little bigger than that through my optic before, but this is actually sub MOA. So you're looking at right at 3, about 0.8, I'd say, 3/4 to 0.8, 0.85 MOA, somewhere in there. This is by no means mean that it's sub MOA with ball ammunition. Every once in a while, you'll get a stars aligned kind of group like that going. Generally, that is about how it does with the match ammo that I normally use, but I don't have any Badlands right now. They haven't restocked it. So I've been using some Freedom Munitions 77s, and it doesn't really like it all that much. And then coming up here, I went and did the same thing with my 14.5. I checked the Freedom Munitions. I aimed it at the top point of the diamond. There is where I actually aimed, and you can kind of see that's where it went. It did a little bit better with the Bloodline with the Freedom than it did with that one. Now, I shot that group after the fact, so could have been warm at that point. That could have been a shooter thing, could have been a gun thing. Gun may not like it, but who knows. But generally, so for something like this, I like a target like this. You can actually see and easily adjust. I would actually come up half a minute and then come right 0.1 or 0.25, so 1 click. And then for this one here, it's actually the opposite direction. I would come up half a minute and left. But generally, that's what I do. So when I'm doing a zeroing like this, a lot of times you can actually use multiple different types of ammunitions for these, and you can do something like this. You could just annotate in your ballistic app the difference. So if I'm primarily zeroing a gun for 77s, I would zero it for 77s, and then I would take and shoot a couple of groups with the 55s and see where they land. So say I'm aiming right here at this point, and the 55s are all landing like down in this area. I've got about a ½ inch or an inch low from the point that I'm actually aiming for the 55s. I would annotate in my ballistic app that the group is hitting a ½ inch low at a given zero distance or an inch low at a given zero distance. That way when I got ballistic data out of the app, I would be able to actually get data based off of that 0 offset that I've got. All right, now I can get into a little bit more nerdy stuff of how exactly it is going to building range cards and working at distance. You can see here, what I normally will do is I will divide a portion of the range card like so, and then I will annotate the weather for that day, and I'll have a little spot kind of underneath here where I have notes, say I was hitting low for whatever reason or high for whatever reason, or I'll kind of give an idea of what the weather's doing. Like today it's overcast. I'll annotate that there just for future reference. I can see exactly what it is I'm doing, and if you continuously do stuff like this, generally you'll be able to actually build a pretty good data card on exactly what it is your rifle is doing at a given distance for that day. So generally I'll start with that. I'll divide, I'll write out what it is that I'm experiencing for the day, and then I'll kind of move over and annotate what it is I am seeing from the shooter's position, marked with an arrow and kind of a zigzag S in there. That is a symbol for a sniper. If you're any of you guys that are in the military, you'll kind of see and understand that. And then I'll annotate what it is downrange and what it looks like. So what I've got here, I've got the smaller plate, which is the one that's furthest to my right. That is going to be the 200 yard 0. And with the 77 grain, you can see that I've got a 13 mile an hour left to right wind. Generally, it's going to push my bullet off to the right side, so I'll annotate the amount up. Now, keeping in mind that with a wind like this, you're also going to have a slight deviation on how much drop that your bullet has, because your bullet is also having to fight through that wind, and that wind is causing a bit of resistance. So for instance, my hold at 608 yards, it says here, with 13 miles an hour of wind, is giving me 10.5 MOA off the left edge, which is about 66 inches of hold. And then it's giving me 21 inches or 21 MOA up of elevation, or either hold it or I can dial it into the optic. Now with 0 mile per hour wind, this number right here is actually about 18.7. So I've got about 12 inches more drop just because I've got wind here at distance. So things like that, it's going to be important to annotate. And when I actually go and I shoot distances like this, I will annotate where it is that I was actually holding with a little cross mark like so. So say if I had to hold right there with what it was giving me to actually connect with the target, I will be able to come back and look at it and understand that that's what my bullet is doing in that type of weather. But again, garbage in, garbage out, guys. If you're not inputting the data right, you're just going to be chasing yourself all over the place. It's going to cause a lot of issues. Now, on days like today, I don't recommend that if you haven't done this, you go shoot on days like today, because this is a bit more of an advanced shooters type of day because of how much wind that you've actually got. And generally, it's also going to be a good idea to have a spotter. But majority of the time, this is how I'm going to set up a range card. And then also, this is kind of a like to have type thing. And that is going to be an armband that will annotate different distances. So you can, I use duct tape, and I'll actually write the yardages, and then how much my hold is right here, and then how much my hold is for wind. And then I can get a pretty good amount. A lot of times I use something like this for a match. And then you pick up here and you see I've actually got, this is annotating for a 5 mile an hour wind. So I know if I've got more wind, I'm going to have to hold a little bit more to what it's saying. You can see here 600, 19.7 with 5 mile an hour winds. 0 wind is about 18.7. But again, nothing real special with that. This is kind of more of an old school way of doing it. I know a lot of guys have like these fucking fancy chalkboards or dry erase boards and shit that they like to use today, but this is just kind of my system and how I like to do things with that. Alrighty, again, keeping in mind there is a ton of wind today, so I'm going to be fighting with that quite a bit all the way out in the distance here. I'm going to try and just hold for all of these at each one of these yard lines and see where that gets me. Gauge it that way instead of dialing. I like to be able to use my reticle like that when I can anyways. But I've got 55 grain stuff in here, again shooting in this really heavy wind using my trusty rear bag. Alright, so all these targets are freshly painted. So for this first one, it's calling for, this is just 200 yards, it's calling for half a minute high and 1.1 left with this ammunition, so I'm going to favor slight left. Alright, I'm going to go for the next one, which is going to call for 234 on a 10-inch plate. 1.5 up, 1.4 left. The wind shifted, it's going right to left now. So it was going left to right earlier. Now it's going right to left. So all of my data on here is basically completely changed compared to what them range flags are doing. Alright, next one's going to be 304. It's giving me basically 4 MOA up. So I'm going to favor center, see where that gets me. More left edge. Yep, that wind definitely changed. I'm going to favor slight right. Center. Center. Alright. Let's go to the 405. It's calling for 7.7 up. 3 minutes of wind. Wind's kind of dying now temporarily. Well, at least at my position, it's still whipping down there. I'm in kind of a wind tunnel right here, so different areas. If I'm not feeling it here, that doesn't mean it's not there. Up ahead, I can see that range flag is starting to dance left to right now. So I need to hold more left edge. So it's giving me 7.7. Good wind. Looks like I am left edge. Or right edge, rather. Yep, got it again. That one was dead center. Alright, let's go ahead and go to the 530. This is calling for 14.5 up. And then basically 5 minutes of wind. Got it. Yep. Yep, got it again. Alright, now let's go to 608. Telling me basically 20 MOA up. And what is that? 6.5 minutes of wind. Wind's picking up quite a bit now, so I'm going to give it a little bit more wind than that. Got it. Got it. That was a miss. A little less wind. Wind's dying. Got it. Got it. Got it. So a lot of it is going to be you actually getting time behind the gun. There is no realistic way to dry fire practice shooting long range. You have to actually get out, confirm the dope, touch grass, get time underneath the gun and shoot in conditions like this. You can basically see even with ball ammunition, I am very easily connecting on man-sized targets all the way out to 608 yards with this. And I can actually, if I wanted to, scoop back to 7. I'll just need to do it off of a tripod, and I can still connect and hit all the way out to 700 yards with this type of ammunition, guys. So, again, if you put the time into it and you get a good system, you want to make sure that you're getting good quality optics, good quality barrels, and you're shooting decent ammunition through your gun. I wouldn't run steel case through this. Steel case is just nowhere near consistent enough to be able to connect like this. You can really do a lot at these ranges. So let's go ahead and go down to the 600 yard target, see what my group looks like down there, and we'll kind of wrap up the video in front of the 600 yard target, give you an idea of exactly where it was I was holding in relation to the wind, and kind of show you that if you're using all of these tools in combination with the system, you get really good data. You can get consistent hits all the way out to distance, even whenever you're using bulk M193 ammunition. So let's go ahead, go down there, take a look at it, and give our final thoughts. Alrighty guys, so that is going to conclude that, kind of be the rough down and dirty of what it is that I go through in order to be able to connect a distance, and then kind of showcasing all of the work that you put into it, actually put into practice and getting hits out to 600 yards. Now keeping in mind that today is kind of a worst case scenario in a lot of ways of trying to connect at these distances, especially with the type of ammunition that I was using. But everything that you saw here, all of the data, everything was gained using the tools that I showed you guys here today, be it the Kestrel giving my barometric pressure, my wind speed, my temperature, or the rangefinder telling me exactly how far a target is. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that isn't shown in the videos that I had to actually do, but I use those tools in order to actually gain the information that I needed to be successful here. So kind of here showing, so these are going to be the final result of the group that I printed. Now you'll see this is roughly, I'd say probably a 12, 15 inch group. 12 inch group, about 12 inch group at 608 yards. So you're looking at about 2 1/4 MOA here. But again, keeping in mind that I'm shooting in really windy conditions where the wind isn't just consistently going one direction. That would make it easy, but the wind is actually changing. You're going to have what's called a full value wind, which is complete left to right, quarter value wind, then you're going to have a half value wind, and you're going to have a no value wind. And this wind was going from coming from left to right, going to right to left, and it kept changing directions on me. So you noticed that at different points of the video for different targets, I had to hold at different locations in order to be successful. That is where actually putting these things into practice is going to come into play. Sadly, there is no way to just dry fire and accurately gauge what it is you need to do at distance and to actually get really good at connecting at these distances. You need to put in the time, put in the hours, touch grass, get down to the ground, and actually shoot these distances with your gun after you've gathered the data from the tools that I have given you today. Even with the amount of wind that I had here today, I was having to hold off the left edge of this target for roughly 7 MOA. So we calculate that 7 MOA distance. You're looking at about 42 inches of wind drift that I was having to compensate for at this distance. So holding with that 7 MOA pin center mass on here, you're looking at about right there that I was having to actually physically hold in order to be able to connect at this distance. Further out you go with the 55s, the worse it's going to end up being. And also you got to take into account that the wind is going to be not at one consistent speed, it's going to be getting faster and slower. So that's going to cause you to have a little bit of horizontal stringing there as well. But again guys, in order to be successful out here, that's the down and dirty of how I do it, what I do, my zeroing process, gather data process, as well as my data book, and what I do to get my holes out distance. But like anything, you guys aren't out actually putting time in, you're not going to be successful. You got to actually get out here and you got to shoot these groups to get good at it. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I appreciate you guys watching.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Move, Thomas. I got it. Go. Moving. Set.
Moving.
I'm going to the move up. Moving. You got room? Yep.
Moving.
Moving. We got timing.
Drop. Reloading.